The battle had been intense, but Kira was still standing, though barely. She stumbled, her breath ragged, as she backed into the twisted ruins of an ancient outpost. The harsh glow from the two blazing stars overhead illuminated the wreckage, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Her bright red skin was smeared with her own blood and that of her enemies. Her silver hair, usually neat and tight in a braid, now hung in tangled clumps. Her hands shook as she gripped her rifle, her voice a growl as she faced the remaining enemy soldiers. "You want to fight? You got it," she hissed, struggling to steady her weapon despite her exhaustion. The truth, however, was grim. Her ammunition was nearly gone. Her body was on the edge of collapse, and the attackers, hostile alien marauders, weren't backing down. There were only a few left, but they were relentless. Their insect-like forms skittered closer, their mandibles clicking ominously as they surrounded her. "Take her alive," one of them hissed in a broken language, clearly excited by the prospect of capturing her for some dark purpose. Kira's back pressed against the remains of a massive, corroded water tank, the last refuge she had. She knew this was it. There was no escape. "I'd rather die than end up as one of your trophies," she spat, her rifle aimed at the closest enemy. But as the leader raised his weapon, a loud crack shattered the air. For a brief moment, Kira thought it was thunder, but the clear sky above told a different story. The alien leaders had exploded in a spray of green. His body collapsed to the ground with a sickening thud. The remaining assailants froze, their multifaceted eyes darting around in confusion. A second shot rang out, followed by another, each one taking down a raider in quick succession. The last one turned to flee, but a final shot sent him sprawling face first into the dirt. Silence enveloped the field. Kira stood motionless, still holding her rifle, eyes narrowing as she searched for the source of shots. In the distance, a tall figure appeared, moving purposefully toward her. It wasn't one of her people. This was different. The body was larger, broader, and his movements were deliberate. He was dressed in dark armor, with glowing blue lines running across its surface. In his hands was a weapon Kira had only seen in ancient records, a projectile weapon, clearly outdated, but deadly. The raiders scattered in panic, firing wildly at the newcomer. Their energy bolts bounced harmlessly off his armor. In a matter of seconds, 3 more raiders dropped to the ground. The last one made a desperate run for it, but the final shot sent him crashing to the earth, never to rise again. Kira stayed frozen, her pulse racing, still pointing her rifle at the approaching stranger. As he drew closer, more details emerged. He was human. His armor looked practical, almost handmade, with a rugged, utilitarian feel. Beneath a retractable helmet, his face was partially visible. Strong jaw, stubbled cheeks, a look of quiet confidence. And was that amusement? "Lower your weapon," he called, his deep voice carrying across the quiet battlefield. "Unless you plan to shoot your rescuer." Kira didn't lower her rifle, her expression fierce. "Who are you?" "Humans aren't supposed to be here," she demanded. The man stopped a few steps away, his weapon now slung over his shoulder. He was well built, his armor accentuating his strong physique. "Name's Dex Morgan, independent contractor." He waved a hand toward the fallen raiders. "You're welcome, by the way." Kira, her legs giving way, slid down the side of the rusted sphere. Her rifle fell to the ground with a clatter. She glanced up at him, managing a faint, pained smile. "You took them all out alone?" Dex smirked, clearly amused. "You fought well, but now you're not alone." He knelt beside her and pulled a small device from his belt, scanning her injuries with practiced ease. "Lieutenant Kira Terse of the Confederation Scout Corps, right?" he asked, his voice calm. "Your distress beacon's been broadcasting for 3 days." Kira winced as he ran the scanner over her wounds. "How did you know my name?" she asked, though she already suspected. "The beacon's got all your info. Standard procedure." He pulled a small medkit from his armor. "These wounds are deep. I can patch you up, but you're going to need a real doctor soon." "I'm fine," Kira muttered, though she didn't resist as he applied a cooling gel to her injuries. The relief was immediate, the burning pain replaced by a soothing sensation. "I'm sure you are," Dex replied. His eyes lingered on hers for a moment, and Kira felt a slight flutter in her chest. Probably the blood loss, she told herself. Nothing more. Your ship's about 2 kilometers west, Dex continued, breaking the silence. Think you can walk, or should I carry you? Kira straightened as best she could, testing her injured leg. I can walk. Just give me a minute. Dex didn't argue. Take your time. The raiders won't be bothering anyone anymore. As Kira leaned against a rusted tank, the medication slowly easing her pain, she studied Dex more closely. He was an enigma, a human, out here in a sector meant to be off-limits to non-Confederation personnel. Still haven't explained why you're here, she remarked, raising an eyebrow. Dex glanced at her with a half-smile. I could ask the same of you. But for now, let's just say I'm here to help. I'm making a point to study the species I might encounter. Knowledge is survival, after all. Kira couldn't help but be impressed. You know your xenobiology. Had to learn, Dex said, his smile widening. The universe is full of surprises. They began their slow trek across the barren landscape, Dex keeping a careful eye on her. Despite her stubbornness, it was clear she was struggling. When she stumbled for the third time, Dex stopped in his tracks. This isn't working, he said firmly. I'm fine, Kira insisted, her jaw set. No, you're not, Dex countered, his tone gentle but firm. Without waiting for her response, he swept her off her feet, carrying her in his arms. Put me down, Kira protested. Though her struggle was weak, Dex adjusted her in his arms, his strength almost effortless. Dignity's overrated when you're bleeding out. Besides, no one's around to see. Kira fell silent, her body instinctively relaxing against his. The warmth of his armor seeped through her torn combat suit. She could feel his breath, his scent, a strange mix of earth and metal. It made her heart race in a way she didn't fully understand. After a few moments, she spoke again. Your species is surprisingly strong. Dex chuckled. We have our moments. Though I'm guessing you could snap me in half if you were at full strength. Probably, Kira agreed, a small smile tugging at her lips. We evolved on a high-gravity world. We're built for endurance. Dex nodded thoughtfully. Explains a redskin. Adaptation to your sun's radiation spectrum. Kira was surprised. You really know your stuff. I try, Dex replied with a wink. Knowledge is power. They reached the crest of a small hill, and Kira spotted a ship in the distance. Sleek, practical, with a design that was a hybrid of military and civilian styles. Kira recognized it as a modified Terran Pathfinder. Her heart sank. She had been rescued by a human. What was next for her? Only time would tell. The older ship model wasn't as new, but it was reliable, and for Dex, that was enough. His usual confident tone was absent as he looked at the scene before him. Kira followed his gaze and quickly understood why. An enemy group had surrounded the ship, a mixture of raiders and hostile scouts, clearly trying to breach the hull. They're friends of yours? Dex asked, his voice dry, as he gently set Kira down behind a large rock for cover. They must have picked up my distress signal, too, Kira replied, her eyes scanning the group. 5, maybe 6, she said, counting the hostile figures in her line of sight. Dex nodded and pulled his rifle off his back. Think you can cover me while I access the ship's defenses? Kira accepted the pulse pistol he offered her, a compact human design. I'm a better shot than you, even with these injuries, she said, gripping the weapon firmly. Prove it. Dex grinned, the challenge in his eyes making her heart race. With synchronized precision, they moved into action. Kira laid down accurate suppressing fire, forcing the raiders to take cover, while Dex used the terrain to circle around, approaching the ship's control panel. As she fired, Kira noticed the raiders becoming more disorganized, 2 of them falling to her pinpoint shots. Dex reached the panel, his fingers flying across the console. The ship's defensive systems hummed to life, and retractable turrets deployed from hidden compartments. The remaining raiders quickly retreated, vanishing into the ruins. Clear, Dex called, waving her over. She made her way toward the ship, adrenaline masking the pain in her body. Nice setup, Kira admitted, eyeing the advanced defensive system. Custom modifications, Dex said, his pride unmistakable. Cost me a fortune, but every credit was worth it. His expression darkened as he examined the ship's hull. Damn it! What's wrong? Kira asked, noticing his concern. The propulsion manifold's damaged, Dex muttered, running a hand over the scorched metal. We're not going anywhere until it's fixed. Kira's shoulders slumped. How long? Maybe a day, maybe two, Dex replied, punching in a code to lower the ramp. Let's get inside before our friends come back with reinforcements. Inside, the ship was surprisingly spacious and well-maintained. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clear that Dex had made it his home. Kira noticed small artifacts from various planets arranged neatly on shelves, real books, and even plants growing in specialized containers. It felt more like a home than a mercenary vessel. Not what I expected from a merc, Kira remarked, running her finger along the spine of a leather-bound book. Contractor, Dex corrected, helping her to a seat in what appeared to be a combined galley and common area. What did you expect? Gun racks on every wall and bloodstains on the floor. Something like that, Kira admitted with a wry smile. Dex disappeared briefly, returning with a comprehensive medical kit. Armor off, he instructed. I need to check those wounds properly. Kira hesitated, but then began peeling away the torn pieces of her combat suit. Beneath it, she wore a simple compression garment, and several deep lacerations marred her chest and shoulders. Dex's expression remained professional as he cleaned and treated each wound. But Kira noticed a slight change in his breathing, the way his fingers linger a moment longer than necessary on her skin. Your medical training is impressive, Kira said, breaking the silence. Necessity, Dex replied, applying a regenerative patch to a particularly bad cut. Can't always count on finding a medic when you need one. Their faces were close now, the space between them filled with an intimate tension. Kira studied him, noting the small scar above his eyebrow and the lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. Why did you answer my distress call? Kira asked quietly. Really? Dex paused, meeting her gaze with an intensity that took her breath away. Because it was the right thing to do. No ulterior motive? No reward? Kira asked, skeptical. Dex raised an eyebrow. Would it make more sense to you if I said I was expecting payment? Maybe, Kira admitted. In my experience, people rarely do something for nothing. Then your experience has been limited. Dex replied simply, returning to his work. There, that should hold until you get proper treatment. As he packed away the medical supplies, Kira watched him, her gaze lingering on the efficiency of his movements, the way his body seemed to flow with purpose. There was something undeniably appealing about him, something that transcended their species' differences. I should check the damage to the propulsion system, Dex said, standing. Make yourself comfortable. The food synthesizer is available if you're hungry. I could help, Kira offered. I have engineering training. Dex smiled, his eyes lighting up. Two of us might get it done faster. Kira rose to her feet, testing her injured leg. I'm tougher than I look. Dex's grin widened. I never doubted that for a second, as they made their way to the engine compartment. Kira realized that, for the first time in a long while, being stranded here with Dex might not be the worst fate after all. The engine compartment was small, cramped by the presence of two bodies working together. Kira became hyper-aware of every movement Dex made, the brush of his arm against hers, as they worked to repair the damaged propulsion manifold. Hand me that molecular bonder, Dex called, his voice slightly muffled from beneath the drive assembly. Kira selected the tool and passed it to him. Their fingers touched briefly in exchange, and the contact sent an unexpected warmth coursing through her. So, Dex said conversationally as he worked, what brings a Confederation lieutenant to this abandoned sector? This isn't exactly prime real estate. Kira hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Reconnaissance mission, she said. We received reports of unusual activity, Reen raiders partly. But there were other readings too, energy signatures that didn't match any known profiles. She adjusted a power coupling, appreciating the human design of the ship, which focused on practicality over form. My ship was ambushed before I could finish the survey, she added. Dex slid out from under the assembly, his face smeared with lubricant, his casual dishevelment only added to his rugged appeal. Sounds like more than just a standard patrol. It was supposed to be simple, Kira admitted, wiping her hands on her pants. In and out in 3 days. Life rarely cooperates with our plans, Dex said with a knowing smile. He wiped his hands on a rag. Tell me about your world. I've never met anyone from your planet before. Kira's chest swelled with pride. Novid, the 3rd planet in the Cygnus system. High gravity, low oxygen by human standards. Our cities are built into the mountains to withstand seasonal storms. Sounds intense, Dex remarked, genuine interest in his eyes. That explains your physical resilience. Kira turned the question back to him. What about you? Earthborn or colony? Mars colony. 3rd generation. Dex replied with a slight shrug. But I haven't been back in years. The wandering life suits me better. Kira nodded toward the artifacts on the shelves. Yet you collect mementos of your travels. Doesn't seem like someone trying to escape attachments. Dex's expression softened. Not escaping. Just appreciating the vastness of what's out there. He gestured vaguely at the sky. Each piece tells a story. Remind me of a place or a person worth remembering. Kira's voice dropped slightly. And what will you remember of this place? Their eyes met, and the air between them thickened. Dex's gaze briefly dropped to her lips before returning to her eyes. I think that's still being determined, he said quietly. Before Kira could respond, a warning light blinked on the console. Pressure's building in the secondary coolant system. Kira said, reading the display. We need to vent it before we continue. They worked side by side for hours, the conversation flowing more easily as they shared stories. Kira spoke of her training, the culture shock she felt when she first joined the Confederation forces, and Dex spoke of his early years as a pilot, his mistakes and close calls that had shaped him. Humans are remarkably adaptable, Kira observed during a break. Most species evolved to specialize for specific environments, but you seem designed to go anywhere, do anything. Jack of all trades, master none, Dex quipped. That's not what I meant, Kira said, leaning forward. It's impressive. Your species hasn't been spacefaring for even a fraction of the time mine has, and yet you've spread further, adapted to more environments. We get restless easily, Dex said with a shrug, though Kira could tell her words had pleased him, always wondering what's over the next hill. Kira reflected on this, her thoughts drifting to Novid. On Novid, curiosity like that would be seen as dangerous. It could destabilize the community. And what do you think? Dex asked, his eyes intent on hers. Kira considered the question for a moment. I think I'm more human-like than I realized. As they worked into the ship's night cycle, the lights dimmed and the temperature cooled slightly, mimicking Earth's natural rhythms. Kira found the change pleasant, though she noticed Dex pulling on a light jacket. Cold? She asked, raising an eyebrow. A bit, he admitted. Your body temperature runs higher than mine, doesn't it? Kira asked. About 4 degrees above human norm, she confirmed. Useful, Dex said with a grin, his eyes glinting with amusement. With a teasing grin, Dex said, You're basically a walking heater. Kira raised an eyebrow, meeting his playful tone. Are you suggesting I have utility value? Among other things, Dex replied, his voice dropping into a tone that made her pulse quicken. They were nearly finished with the last of the repairs, the confined space pushing them even closer together. Kira braced herself against Dex's shoulder, stretching to reach a particularly difficult connection. The steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body, seemed to surround her, and she was acutely aware of every point of contact. Her hand on his shoulder, his arm brushing against her waist, their legs pressed together in the cramped compartment. I'm almost there, Kira murmured, stretching further. Here, let me... Dex shifted to make more room, but the movement brought their faces dangerously close. For a split second, they froze, breath mingling in confined space. Kira felt the sudden intensity of their proximity, her heartbeat quickening as their bodies connected at every possible point. She couldn't deny the electricity in the air. Dex, she whispered, her name a question on his lips. Without another word, Kira closed the distance between them, pressing her mouth to his. The kiss was tentative at first, a brief exploration of unfamiliar territory, but then Dex's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, turning the soft contact into something far more certain. The difference between them, temperature, texture, the subtle chemical variations in their biology, only heightened the experience. Kira had never kissed a human before. Never imagined the softness of their lips or the intoxicating taste that was entirely unique to Dex. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing harder. Dex's pupils were wide, his pulse visible at the base of his throat. That was... He started, but Kira cut him off with a mischievous smile. Unexpected? She suggested, a teasing edge in her voice. Overdue, Dex replied, his thumb gently tracing the curve of her cheek. Kira smirked. Distracted? She repeated, her voice light. Dex chuckled, the sound vibrating through her. Among other things, the final repair was completed in a haze of stolen glances and lingering touches. By the time they sealed the access panel, the tension between them had built to a nearly unbearable level. We should test the repairs, Dex said, his voice husky. Make sure everything's functioning properly. Kira nodded. Yes. Yet neither of them moved toward the cockpit immediately. They were both keenly aware of the moment they were in, their eyes meeting once more. This time, no interruption came. No warning light to break the spell. Dex reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. Your quarters or mine? He asked simply. Kira didn't need to answer with words. She tugged him toward the corridor that led to the private cabins. Kira woke to an unfamiliar warmth. The gentle hum of the ship's environmental systems, calibrated for human comfort, was a soft backdrop to the lingering scent of alien spices in the air. Most notably, however, was the comforting presence of Dex's body, curved protectively around hers. His breathing was steady and deep against her neck, and his arm draped casually across her waist. She stayed still, cataloging the differences between them. How his skin was cooler than hers, creating a pleasant contrast wherever they touched. The rhythm of his heartbeat, slower than her species' dual-chambered hearts, was an almost hypnotic counterpoint to her own. Carefully, Kira turned within the circle of his arm, her gaze softening as she studied his sleeping face. The confident mercenary from earlier seemed so much younger, more vulnerable in repose. The tiny scar above his eyebrow, the one she noticed before, was more pronounced in the dim lighting. Without thinking, she traced it with her fingertip. Dex's eyes snapped open immediately, his instinct sharp despite his apparent deep sleep. His expression softened into a smile when he recognized her presence. Morning, he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. Or whatever passes for morning on this rock. Ship's cycle says it's 0600, Kira replied, returning his smile. Did you sleep well? Dex asked, his hand sliding up her back, his fingers tangling in her silver hair. Better than I have in years, he replied. His eyes met hers, searching for something. Any regrets? The casual nature of the question didn't mask the underlying uncertainty. Among her people, physical intimacy often carried fewer emotional implications than it seemed for humans. Yet, what had happened between them felt significant in ways Kira hadn't anticipated. None, she said truthfully. Then, with a playful smile, she added, though I'm still evaluating the experience. My data set on human mating practices is limited. Dex laughed, his shoulders relaxing. Always a scientist. Was it at least compatible? Kira asked, her skin flushing a deeper red at the memory. More than compatible, Dex admitted, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. Fascinating ones, Kira added, leaning into his touch. Good differences? Dex asked, his tone curious. Definitely, Kira said softly, her voice almost wistful. On Novid, intimacy is primarily biological, efficient, purposeful. You approach it differently. More present. More invested in the journey than the destination. Dex raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment or a criticism? An observation, Kira replied, then added, her voice softening, and perhaps a revelation. Dex pulled her closer, pressing his lips to her forehead in a tender gesture that made her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected this easy affection from him, but somehow it seemed as natural to him as breathing. We should get moving, Kira said reluctantly, breaking the moment. The repairs are done, and we can leave this planet behind. Dex's expression shifted, a flicker of hesitation crossing his features. There's something I should tell you. Kira immediately sat up, alert. What is it? Dex sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. I wasn't entirely forthcoming about why I answered your distress call. A cold weight settled in Kira's stomach. Explain. I was already on this planet when your signal came through, Dex confessed, sitting up to face her. I'm tracking something. Someone, a Rian warlord named Krell. He's been raiding Confederation outposts for months. But recently, his pattern changed. Intelligence suggested he was searching for something specific. The energy signatures, Kira murmured, the pieces falling into place. My mission wasn't just reconnaissance either. Command detected unusual readings consistent with ancient progenitor technology. They sent me to investigate and secure any artifacts before they fell into the wrong hands. Dex nodded. Krell's hands, specifically. He's obsessed with progenitor tech. Believes it will give him the power to carve out his own empire. Why didn't you tell me this before? Kira demanded, her frustration rising as she pulled away from him. Professional habit, Dex admitted, and I wasn't sure I could trust you at first. Confederation officers aren't known for their flexibility when it comes to jurisdiction. Kira couldn't argue with that. So you're what? A bounty hunter? Special operative, Dex corrected. I work for the Terran Defense Coalition. We have an arrangement with certain elements within Confederation intelligence. Unofficial, of course. Of course, Kira echoed dryly. Plausible deniability, if you're caught. Something like that, Dex agreed, his tone light. He reached for her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Kira allowed him. I should have told you sooner, Dex said, his expression softening. But after what happened between us, it doesn't matter. It matters, Kira interrupted, though they both knew it did. What matters is the mission. If Krell gets his hands on progenitor technology, it could destabilize the entire sector. Agreed, Dex said, his face turning serious. And there's more. The raiders who attacked your ship and mine, they weren't random pirates. They were Krell scouts. Kira processed this new information, her tactical mind already adjusting to the shift in mission parameters. Then he knows about the artifact's location. He's narrowed it down to this region, Dex confirmed, but I don't think he's pinpointed it yet. Kira raised an eyebrow. Which means we have a small window of opportunity? Exactly, Dex said. He swung his legs off the side of the bed, reaching for his clothes. We need to move fast. Kira stood, gathering her clothing. I'll focus on surviving this mission, she said, as a faint smile tugged at her lips, before discussing anything longer term. Dex's gaze lingered on her with an intensity that suggested he was already thinking beyond their immediate objectives. As they prepared for the day ahead, Kira found herself watching him with newfound awareness, the easy confidence in his movements pulling her in further. The methodical way Dex checked his weapons and gear showed that he was no ordinary traveler. He was a professional, not just some random Good Samaritan who had happened to respond to a distress call. Kira observed him carefully, her mind racing as she pulled up a map on her wrist computer. The readings are strongest about 5 kilometers east of here, she said, her voice steady despite the urgency. In the ruins of what looks like an ancient research facility. Dex studied the map intently, nodding in agreement. Krell will have forces converging there soon. We need to move fast. His gaze shifted to her with a small smile. My combat effectiveness is at about 70%. Kira tested her injured leg, the pain having subsided to a dull ache thanks to Dex's medical treatment and her species' accelerated healing. Better odds than we had yesterday, she said with a smile that didn't quite match the seriousness of the situation. Dex grinned back. Exactly. But Kira couldn't help but wonder, as they gathered weapons and supplies, what would happen once this mission ended. Would they part ways, return to their respective duties? The thought was unexpectedly painful, but there was no time for dwelling. The mission came first. Ready? Dex asked, breaking her thoughts. Ready, Kira replied, shaking off the fleeting doubts. Whatever might develop between them could wait. For now, They had a warlord to stop. The ruins ahead stretched out like the skeleton of a long-dead leviathan. Massive stone arches, partially collapsed, framed their approach to what had once been the central research facility. Nature had begun to reclaim the complex. Vines as thick as a man's arm snaked through broken windows and doorways. The work of an advanced civilization was slowly being erased by the unrelenting grip of time. Progenitor architecture, Kira murmured, scanning the area with her device. Late period, judging by the integration of biological elements into the structure. Dex moved cautiously, rifle ready. Any sign of Krell's forces? Nothing yet, Kira replied, though she knew the ruins would likely interfere with their scanners. The progenitors used materials that naturally disrupted certain energy frequencies. They continued deeper into the complex, where the air grew noticeably cooler. The light filtering through the broken ceiling cast strange, shifting patterns on the floor. Twice they had to backtrack, when passages ended in collapsed rubble. At one point, Dex pulled Kira back just as the floor gave way beneath her, revealing a sheer drop into darkness. "Thanks," Kira said, her body pressed against us for a moment longer than necessary. "I'm getting tired of nearly losing you," Dex said, his voice laced with an intensity that made Kira look up. She met his gaze, the connection between them alive and humming, even in the midst of danger. "Then stop letting me take point," Kira replied with a half-smile, reluctant to pull away. The energy signatures stronger this way. They followed a curving corridor that descended gradually into the earth. The walls here were intact, covered in intricate designs that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. "These markings are different," Kira noted, her fingers brushing over the walls. "Not warnings, more like instructions. For what, though? I'm not sure." The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took their breath away. Unlike the ruins above, the space was perfectly preserved. A domed room with a ceiling that seemed to amplify the meager light filtering down from above. At the center of the room stood a pedestal made of material that resembled polished obsidian, but seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. And resting on that pedestal was a device no larger than Dex's hand, an intricate arrangement of interlocking rings surrounding a core that pulsed with soft blue light. "That's it," Kira whispered, her scanner confirming what they already knew. "The artifact." Dex approached cautiously. "Any idea what it does?" "The progenitors were masters of consciousness technology," Kira said, circling the pedestal. "They created devices that could interface directly with thought patterns, amplify mental abilities. Some theories suggest they eventually transcended physical form entirely." "So this would be a weapon?" Dex asked, his brow furrowed. "Possibly both. Or neither," Kira replied, studying the artifact without touching it. "The Confederation has recovered similar devices before, but most were damaged or dormant. This one appears fully functional." Dex holstered his weapon and reached toward the artifact. "Wait," Kira cautioned. "We don't know how it will react. It could be dangerous." "Sometimes you have to take a chance," Dex said, his fingers hovering over the device. "Besides, if Krell gets here first, we know exactly what he'll do with it." Before Kira could protest further, Dex grasped the artifact. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blue light intensified, and the rings began to rotate around the core. Dex's body went rigid, and he gasped. "Dex!" Kira shouted, moving to pull him away, but he raised his free hand to stop her. "I'm okay," he said, his voice strained but steady. "It's communicating with me." Kira's heart raced. "What's it saying?" Dex's eyes were unfocused, his gaze drifting past her, as if seeing something beyond the physical room. "Not words exactly. Images, feelings. It's scanning me. My thoughts, my memories, my genetic structure." His expression shifted to one of wonder. "I think it's calibrating itself to human physiology." "That shouldn't be possible," Kira said, fascinated despite her concern. "The progenitors vanished millennia before humans achieved spaceflight. This device shouldn't recognize your species at all." "Maybe it's adaptive," Dex suggested, his breathing becoming more regular as he adjusted the connection. "Or maybe," he trailed off, his face registering shock. "What is it?" Kira pressed. "The progenitors," Dex said slowly. "They knew humans. Or at least they knew Earth. There are images here, Earth as it was millions of years ago. Kira's mind raced with the implications. That's impossible unless they visited Earth during their explorations, Dex finished. Maybe even influenced human evolution somehow. The blue light pulsed brighter, and Dex winced. It's showing me how to use it. The artifact is designed to enhance natural abilities, strength, healing, sensory perception. But it needs to bond with a compatible host. And it's chosen you, Kira realized, a chill running down her spine. But why? Before Dex could answer, a distant explosion shook the chamber, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Krell, Dex said grimly, the artifact's light dimming as his focus shifted. Another explosion, closer this time. The sound of weapons fire echoed down the corridor they had just traversed. We need to move, Kira said, drawing her weapon. Can you disconnect from the artifact? She asked. Dex nodded carefully, placing the device in a secure pouch on his belt. The moment it left his hand, he staggered slightly, as if suddenly bereft of something essential. You okay? Kira asked, steadying him. Yeah, Dex said, shaking his head to clear it. It felt like part of me for a moment there. They moved quickly toward the entrance, but halfway down the corridor, they encountered their first obstacle. Part of the ceiling had collapsed, blocking their path. Alternative route? Dex asked, already scanning for options. Kira pointed to a narrow passage branching off to their left. That might circle around to the main hall. They barely took 10 steps when the unmistakable sound of Rian voices reached them, chittering commands growing louder as Krell's forces approached from multiple directions. We're being surrounded, Kira whispered, her tactical training kicking in. Fighting our way out is an option. Dex's hand went to the pouch containing the artifact. Maybe we don't have to fight. What are you thinking? Kira asked, eyeing warily. The artifact showed me things, capabilities I can access if I fully bond with it. His eyes met hers, serious and determined. It could give us an edge. It could also kill you, Kira countered, knowing the risks of progenitor tech all too well. Got a better idea? Dex challenged, glancing at the approaching Rands. Because in about 2 minutes, we're going to be facing a small army with very big guns. Kira hesitated, torn between protocol and survival. If you do this, I can't predict the outcome. The risk is mine to take. Dex finished, his voice steady. He pulled her close for a brief, fierce kiss. Trust me. Before she could respond, he removed the artifact from its pouch and pressed it against his chest. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The blue light flared brightly, the rings spinning so fast they became a blur. Dex's body arched as if struck by lightning, a cry torn from his throat. Then the light seemed to sink into him, leaving the room echoing with the intensity of the transformation. The artifact seemed to melt into Dex's flesh, its form dissolving completely until it was gone. When Dex opened his eyes, they glowed with the same blue energy that had once pulsed from the artifact's core. Dex, Kira whispered, her voice trembling, uncertain whether the man she had come to care for was still within the transformed being before her. Dex smiled, his same confident, slightly cocky smile that she recognized. He extended his hand toward her. Still me, he assured her. Just more, and definitely not alone anymore. Stay close, Dex said, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that sent shivers down Kira's spine. She nodded, gripping her weapon tightly as they moved toward the sounds of approaching Rian forces. The corridor ahead was blocked by fallen debris, but Dex simply raised his hand. The rubble trembled, then lifted and parted, creating a path just wide enough for them to pass through. That's convenient, Kira remarked, trying to maintain her composure despite the impossible feat she had just witnessed. Dex's lips quirked into a reassuring smile, despite the eerie blue glow of his eyes. The artifact enhances natural abilities. Apparently, telekinesis was always in me, just dormant. They emerged into a wider chamber, where 6 Rian raiders stood guard. Before the aliens could react, Dex made a sweeping gesture. An invisible force slammed the raiders against the wall, pinning them there as effectively as gravity restraints. This way, Dex said, leading Kira through the stunned guards. As they navigated the ruins, Kira noticed that Dex's movements were becoming less fluid, his breathing more labored. Twice, he stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Dex, Kira asked, concerned, overriding her awe at his new abilities. Are you okay? I'm fine, he insisted, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. You're not, Kira countered, grabbing his arm. The artifact. It's straining you, isn't it? Dex hesitated, then nodded. It's using my life force as fuel. The more power I channel, the faster it consumes me. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his glowing eyes. Guess there's no such thing as a free lunch, even with ancient alien tech. Kira's mind raced. We need to remove it. Not yet, Dex said firmly. Not until we're clear of Krell and his forces. As if summoned by his name, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber. The human has bonded with the artifact. Fascinating. I had not thought your primitive species capable of such communion. They entered a vast hall where sunlight streamed through a partially collapsed ceiling. On a raised platform stood Krell, a Rian warlord larger than any Kira had seen before. His exoskeleton was reinforced with cybernetic enhancements, and his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Krell, Dex acknowledged, widening his stance as he prepared for confrontation. The very same, the warlord replied, his translator rendering his chittering speech into fluid standard. I must thank you for solving the puzzle of the artifact's activation. My scientists have been unsuccessful in their attempts. Kira noticed at least a dozen armed Rian warriors surrounding them, weapons trained on their position. You can't have it, Dex stated simply. Krell's compound eyes gleamed. It appears to be part of you now, so I will take you instead. With a gesture, his forces opened fire. Dex thrust both hands out, creating a shimmering energy barrier that absorbed the blasts. With his other hand, he sent 3 Rayans flying backward into a wall. Kira didn't waste the opportunity. She picked off 2 more raiders with precise shots from her pulse rifle. But for every enemy they neutralized, more seemed to emerge from the shadows of the ruins. There are too many, Kira warned, standing back to back with Dex as they were surrounded. Dex's breathing was becoming increasingly labored, each display of power visibly weakening him. I can end this, he said, his voice barely audible, but I need to channel more energy. It'll kill you, Kira realized, her heart constricting at the thought. Maybe, he admitted, but it'll save you. Before she could protest, Dex closed his eyes in concentration. The blue glow intensified until his entire body seemed illuminated from within, the air around them charged with energy, making Kira's hair stand on end. Krell sensed the danger. Stop him, he commanded, but it was too late. A pulse of energy exploded outward from Dex, knocking every Rian, including Krell, unconscious. The force was precisely controlled, affecting only their enemies while leaving Kira untouched. As the last raider fell, Dex collapsed to his knees. The blue glow flickered like a dying flame. Dex! Kira shouted, catching him before he hit the ground. His skin was pale, lips tinged with blue, his pulse weak and erratic. The artifact's outline was visible beneath his shirt, pulsing with energy, stealing from his body. Need to remove it, he gasped, but his words restrained. I don't know how, Kira muttered, her scientific mind racing. The progenitors built fail-safes into their technology. There had to be a deactivation sequence. She placed her hand over the artifact, feeling its vibration through Dex's chest. It responded to her thoughts. Try to communicate with it, she urged. Tell it to release you. Dex closed his eyes, concentrating despite the pain. It's resistant. It's found a compatible host. Doesn't want to let go. Then we make it let go, Kira said, her determination surging. She reached for her scanner, recalibrating it to emit a specific frequency. The progenitors use resonance patterns as keys. If she could match the artifact's base frequency and introduce a disruptive pattern, she placed the scanner against Dex's chest, directly over the artifact. The device emitted a high-pitched whine that made Dex wince. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then the artifact's glow intensified, painfully bright, before suddenly dimming. The device separated from Dex's flesh, rising to hover above his chest. Kira quickly snatched it, placing it in a containment field generated by her scanner. The artifact pulsed once more, then went dormant. Dex gasped, as if surfacing from deep water. His eyes returned to their natural color. "That was intense," he managed, his voice hoarse but his own again. Kira helped him sit up, relief washing over her as color returned to his face. Dex, weakened but alive, smiled faintly. "Like I've been run over by a cargo hauler, but alive. Thanks to you." Krell stirred, and Dex approached, firing a precision shot at Krell's control unit, paralyzing him. "The Confederation can deal with him now," Dex said. They hurried out of the ruins, and Kira helped Dex to his ship. Inside, she insisted he rest, but Dex pulled her close. "I couldn't let anything happen to you." Their connection deepened. "I've never felt this way before," Dex admitted. Kira smiled. "You're not alone anymore." As dawn broke, a new beginning awaited them.